The wind came crawling across the prairie that evening, dry and sharp as a blade. Dust spiraled off the sun-baked trail, carrying the scent of sage and horses. Eli Maddox tugged at the brim of his hat and squinted toward the horizon. He had spent the entire day fixing a busted fence line, and his shoulders ached with the kind of tired that comes from years of working alone. The land stretched endlessly in every direction. No neighbors for miles, no voice but the wind's. Out here, silence was company, and Eli had learned to live with it. He guided his horse, Copper, toward the lower pasture to check the creek before nightfall. The sun was melting into the mountains, painting the sky in gold and rust. He was thinking about supper, beans and black coffee, when he heard it. A sound so faint, he thought at first it was the cry of a hawk. But then it came again, human, broken, and full of pain. A woman's voice. Eli straightened in the saddle. His heart thudded once, hard. It was rare to find anyone out here, especially this late. He pulled the reins, scanning the brush that lined the creek. The second cry was softer now, like the person had no strength left to call again. He kicked Copper forward. The horse trotted down the slope, hooves crunching over pebbles until Eli spotted movement by the water, something pale against the dark reeds. He dismounted quickly and stepped closer, his boots sinking into the soft mud. That's when he saw her. A young woman lay half-curled beside the water's edge, her dress torn at the hem, her skin gray under the fading light. She looked like she'd been traveling for days, dust in her hair, lips cracked and bleeding, one shoe missing. Eli's gut tightened. Out here, people didn't just wander off the road unless something had gone terribly wrong. He knelt beside her carefully. "Ma'am," he said, voice low. "You hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, glassy and unfocused. She tried to speak but could only manage a ragged breath. Then, barely a whisper. "Hurts. Down there, it burns." Eli froze. For a long second, he didn't move, didn't breathe. The words hung in the air, raw and helpless. His mind raced. Snakebite. Infection. Something worse. He'd seen plenty of pain in his life. Broken bones, gunshot wounds, fevers that cooked a man from the inside, but this was different. This was something fragile and desperate, and he wasn't sure he knew how to handle it. The woman tried to shift, crying out softly, and Eli's chest tightened. She couldn't have been more than 25, maybe younger. Whatever had happened, it had left her half-broken and feverish. He looked around. The creek, the horse, the dying sun, and realized he was the only soul within miles who could help her. Still, his instincts warred inside him. Out here, a man kept to himself. You got involved, you got hurt. That's what experience had taught him. He'd buried enough ghosts to know that some things were better left untouched. But when he looked down again, really looked, he saw the terror behind her eyes, the trembling of her fingers as if she was holding on to life by a thread. Eli ran a hand over his beard, muttering under his breath. Damn it! He reached for his canteen and uncorked it, tilting it toward her lips. She sipped weakly, then coughed, spilling half of it down her chin. Easy, he murmured. You're all right. Just breathe. The wind shifted, carrying the cool scent of the creek and the low hum of crickets beginning their night song. He could feel her fever even from a distance, heat rolling off her skin. She wasn't going to make it to town, not without help. Eli glanced toward the west, where the faint outline of his ranch house stood like a shadow on the plains. It was a 2-hour ride, maybe more in the dark. If he left her, she'd die before morning. If he took her, He was inviting a world of trouble. Still, something inside him stirred, a feeling he thought he'd buried with his wife years ago. He couldn't walk away, not this time. He pulled off his coat and draped it gently over the woman's shoulders. "You hang on," he said quietly. "We'll get you safe." The woman didn't answer. Her eyes rolled back, her body slackening as the last light faded behind the mountains. Eli looked down at her, then toward the endless horizon, and knew there was no turning back. For the first time in years, the silence of the plains felt heavy, with guilt, with duty, with something dangerously close to hope. Eli Maddox had never been the praying kind. The last time he'd spoken to God was the night the fever took his wife, and even then, his words had sounded more like curses than prayers. But as he knelt by the young woman in the flickering glow of the lantern inside his cabin, he found himself whispering things he hadn't said in years. Please, promises, anything that might keep her breathing. He'd carried her back in his arms, the ride long and merciless. The stars had risen by the time they reached his cabin, and he'd laid her gently on his bed, his only bed, while the night wind beat softly against the window panes. Now, she lay there motionless, shivering under his old wool blanket. Her skin was hot as fire, her face ghostly pale. Eli lit another lamp and poured what little whiskey he had left into a basin. The smell of it burned his nose. He knew he was no doctor, but he'd patched up men before. Gunshot wounds, burns, a rattlesnake bite or two. This was different. Whatever was wrong with her wasn't from the outside. It was something deeper, something inside that was eating her alive. "Hold still," he murmured, dipping a rag into the whiskey. His hands trembled as he wrung it out. The woman stirred, her brow creasing in pain. Her eyes fluttered open, glazed with fever, and she looked at him as though she didn't know where she was. "Please," she rasped, "make it stop." Eli swallowed hard. "I'll do what I can." He dabbed at her skin, careful, gentle as he could be. The whiskey hissed against the raw areas, and she cried out, twisting away. He held her steady, his voice low and steady. "It's all right. It's just the whiskey burnin' out the rot. You're gonna be fine." But he wasn't sure she would. The fever was climbing fast. He fetched cool water from the barrel outside, wiping her face, whispering quiet things to keep her from slipping away. It was strange. The sound of his own voice filled the cabin in a way it hadn't in years. Usually it was only the creak of wood, the wind, and the lonely tick of the clock. Now, her soft moans and his murmured reassurances gave life back to the place. Hours passed. The fire crackled low, shadows dancing across the walls. He changed the cloth on her forehead again and again, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. Her breathing came shallow, but steadier now. When she finally stilled, he thought for one heart-stopping moment she was gone, but then she whispered, almost inaudible, "You saved me." Eli froze. The words hit harder than he expected. He looked down at her, this stranger who had stumbled into his life like a ghost, and felt something stir in his chest. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Don't thank me yet," he said softly. "You still got a ways to go." She gave a faint, tired smile before drifting into sleep. Eli sat back in the wooden chair beside the bed, rubbing his eyes. Outside, the coyotes had started their midnight song, and the moonlight poured through the cracks in the shutters, silver and cold. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floorboards. He couldn't help wondering who she was, what had happened to her, and what kind of trouble might follow. He'd found an old locket around her neck earlier, the clasp broken, the picture inside so faded he could barely make out two faces, a man and a child. Whoever they weren't from around here. Maybe she'd been running from something. Or someone. Eli sighed and stood, stretching his sore back. He poured himself a small drink, staring out the window at the endless dark of the plains. The stars were cold tonight, the kind that made a man feel small and forgotten. But not tonight, not entirely. Behind him, the woman stirred again, murmuring something in her sleep. He turned, watching her for a long moment. There was something fragile about her, something that didn't belong in a world as harsh as this one. And somehow, he knew, whatever had brought her to his creek, to his land, to him, it wasn't done yet. He set his glass down and went back to her side, adjusting the blanket to cover her shoulders. "You rest easy now," he whispered. "You're safe here." The words felt strange in his mouth. Safe. It wasn't a word he'd used in a long time. But as the fire crackled and the wind settled into a soft sigh outside, Eli Maddox realized something. Saving her might have saved a part of himself, too. He sat there until dawn, keeping watch as the first light broke over the plains. The woman slept soundly, color slowly returning to her cheeks. And for the first time in years, Eli felt the weight of loneliness lift, just a little, as he whispered to the morning, "Maybe the good Lord ain't done with me after all."